Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry, it's on. It's my great pleasure to introduce our conference speaker for tonight. Most, if not all of you, know Jonathan Pelham. He is a long-term member of our WBA community who has been very generous in sharing his encyclopedic knowledge, both with his peers, but also with novices, which is very unusual for an expert. So we're very, very grateful for that. He's also a valued member of the national community of lepidopterists. Although John has been chasing butterflies since he was a boy, his career had nothing at all to do with butterflies or even biology. In fact, he was a short-haul trucker and a proud teamster. But he was a mad butterflyer on the weekends, taking his family and his boys and everybody else who would go along with him butterflying.
This boy right here.
There you go. So we're fortunate that he is now all in on butterflies. He's a great advocate for WBA and a very delightful conversationalist and sometimes provocateur, as many of you know. So he'll talk tonight about his great passion and life work, butterfly distributions, and how they got to be that way. So thank you so much for being with us tonight, John.
Well, all right.
I also want to give you one of our WBA hats. I don't think you have one, and we want to make sure that you do. There you go. There you go, buddy.
Hey, before I say anything, I can't tell you how grateful I am to have all of you here. Everything that Paulette said was true. The community that we have here is profoundly, it's contrasting with anything anywhere else that I'm familiar with. And so I'm really grateful that you all came here, but you are a captive audience. So anybody that gets up and leaves, I want to see you. The other thing I want to say is that we're part of a lineage that goes way back. You guys may know about Johnson's hair streak. Well, the guy that they named it for was a guy named Orson Bennett Johnson. Orson Bennett Johnson began the Naturalist Club at the University of Washington in the late 1800s. Basically founded the Burke Museum, or what became the Burke Museum. And at the current time, there's a whole bunch of Orson Bennett Johnson specimens, double glass mounted at the Burke Museum. You've seen those, right? Yeah. And they're just astounding pieces of craftsmanship, and they're from all over the world, mostly mislabeled. But that is an important, that's when the lineage that we are a part of began, all right? And it's been through all kinds of people, Kincaid, Johnson Hall, Kincaid, all those are University of Washington buildings that of some note. And then, of course, the Burke Museum, Mel Hatch at the Burke Museum, Dennis Paulson was there. It's just an incredible community that goes through all the time in the past to this moment. And so I will try not to ruin that. Well, I'll try. But okay. So number one is okay. Go to the next one. All right. Now this is a member of this wonderful conglomeration of people here tonight. Melanie Weiss took this image from her cell phone. And I just got to tell you that this has profoundly affected me. And I got to tell you why. And you may get tired of hearing about it, but hey, I'm not going to get tired of telling you about it.
Dylan, can you put the mic closer to your mouth?
Does anybody not hear me?
You're not hearing that.
Okay, fine.
That's better. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a picture that was taken by Melanie Weiss east of Ritzville or thereabouts, and looking west as the sun is setting. You can see, of course, that wonderful crimson or pink, whatever that salmon color is, the layer of clouds, and above that, the moon. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but if you look at the moon, the dark side of the moon is kind of backlit. Can you see that? All right. Do you know what that is? That's called earth shine. Now, if you go out on a summer's night and a full moon is shining, you can almost see your shadow or quite see your shadow. If you're on the moon and you see the earth, dude, you don't want to look directly at it. It'll blind you, right? So we're getting light reflected back from the dark side of the moon, and we're seeing it in this image. Okay, that's one thing. You look at the moon. This is a sliver.
And that sliver is composed of two horns. If you draw a line between those two horns and a line perpendicular to it, you will see where the sun is below the horizon. Now, in my world, we call this a three-body problem, right? This is a 93 million mile three-body problem. It is like one star in our galaxy amongst the millions, trillions of galaxies in the observable universe. Take her up. We are a small part of this whole thing. Behold, something greater than yourself. But we are part of it. We get to see it, and we get to play in it. Take some notes. Now, they could be mental notes. That's okay. You don't have to sit down. I didn't see anybody write anything down except David made. This is the thing about being out in nature with people who love to be out in nature. And so you won't be tested on this unless you misbehave, in which case we'll grill every one of you. Right, next up. Okay, so this is an example of how you photograph a bramble green elephant, right? And the reason is that they always land on the ground, right? This is the same Melanie Weiss doing what a lot of us have seen her do her whole career. And if you can only get a picture by doing something like this, then what are you going to do? You're going to do something like this. And I am astounded constantly because, I've been a collector, a sampler, and I never had to do this because, I had a net and you would get off the ground and I took a shot. Taking a photograph of a butterfly that lands 3 inches off the ground requires this attitude, this temperament, this determination, right? So for me, I say, well, it's inspiration for me because I ain't doing it. I'll tell you that, right? Next up. Okay. Oh, so this discussion centers on a specific part of distribution. And I'm going a little bit backwards from the way a lot of people have presented it in the past, in that I am putting maps up. Now, however they're generated, a good many of them are generated by Madame Labar and her incredible talents. Some of them aren't, and I will probably not give credit to the appropriate people along the way, but just to know that Caitlin is a big part of the best maps that we show county level. And the knowledge that we're talking about here is where a butterfly has been recorded, and looking at those distributions to see if we can maybe see something emerge out of that, something that will give us insight into how things have occurred and maybe talk about how things got to be where they are now. Next up. What does that say?
Glacial max in
Oh, yeah, you're going to hear me talk about glacial max, and I have to let you know that glacial max is a kind of a shorthand that I employ and others too for this, the next slide. All right. Now, that's an example of what North America looked like during glacial max. Now, it's not an absolutely perfect example of what the glacial cover looked like, but it's approximate enough that it'll serve for this conversation. And the thing about that is that it's a good example of what was. It's also a good example of where butterflies weren't, unless one of you defer and decide that butterflies at one time lived under ice. Any takers on that one? I don't think so. Go ahead. No, the other way, I think. Yeah. Okay. So this is an example of what Washington looked like during that same glacial max. And we're talking about Washington. We're not going to do Western U.S. That would be like 3 or 4 days long. But this is, an example of what it looked like in Washington. And the important thing to recognize here is all those arrows. And that kind of shows you which direction these glaciers were coming into our state, which direction they penetrated, and how far they would go along the line. I always look at it another way, and it's like, we're coming at you, and this is how we're coming at you. All right, glaciers are not to be trifled with. They're 1,500 feet in Seattle. That's 3 times as tall as the Space Needle was. And like the thing about glaciers, okay, is that you get to a place where they aren't anymore at the glacial front, And that means that they can no longer support, that glacial mass that's being pushed south, all right? And when they can no longer support that glacial mass, they do something, and you've heard this before. You've seen icebergs calve off of glaciers, right? Well, when these things calved, there were like hundreds of thousands of tons of ice falling from 1,500 or 500 feet, 15,000 feet, no, 1,500, okay. 15, I had it right, 1,500 feet up, and it's falling to the ground, and it's displacing all of that air, and the air has to go someplace, and it goes very fast, like at the speed of sound. So basically what I'm saying is that to live in a periglacial environment, that's an environment next to the glaciers, was perilous, all right? See what I did there? It's periglacial, Next. All right. So now, it's also important to recognize that Washington is not unique, but special in that, next slide, we had an abundance of water. Now, the thing about that, an abundance of water, is that's a good thing, right? And good water, you have water resources and all that. But unfortunately, this was the product of the post-glacial melt. And there was a plumbing problem. And physics has a way of solving plumbing problems in crucial ways, like the Missoula floods. Now, I'm not going to talk about the Missoula floods. There's great animations available, and like you can seek them out if you want. They're really, really amazing things. But they happened like maybe 100 times. And the reason why we know that is that when the floods came down and did this, and by the way, these lakes that you're looking at didn't always happen all at the same time, right? These are examples of lakes that were at one time present in these regions, and probably perennially or repeatedly. But when they had this, it stopped up the Snake River, okay? The Snake River, when it was stopped up, it kind of like dropped all of its silt burden wherever it was. And that silt burden sedimented. And then when it was relieved, the Snake River returned to flow, and it left the sediment, up high and dry on each side of the Snake River. And it goes all the way up to the Touchy, actually. You know the Touchy River? How about Touchy? Come on now. All right. So the deal is that they have recorded over 100 of these, what they call varves, which is each one of these sedimentary layers in the Snake River and the Touchy River Valley. No, I was mistaken, to Canada. And that would indicate that there was 100 times that the Snake River was backed up from these floods that we're looking at. That's pretty impressive. And I have to admit that I'm kind of glad I was there to watch this. Although orbiting the Earth might have been a suitable substitute. What we have to do is imagine what this was going to do to the glacial max. No butterflies under the glaciers. All these floods, as far as I know, butterflies don't live underwater either. So what we've established is there was a time in this state during glacial max and some considerable time afterwards where there was no suitable habitat for butterflies. Now, that's a biogeographer's dream, right? If you know that there was zero butterfly fauna at a place, then current butterfly distribution means that they got these places from somewhere. So you pose the question, where from? Where from? Let's go. So we're going to start with one that I like the best. It's easy to define. You talk about Pacific coast distributions. The Pacific Ocean acts as a profound western border, right? There's very little chance that Hawaiian butterflies are dispersing into the Pacific coast area of Western North America. And if there are butterflies that are dispersing towards Hawaii, it's not for long, right? So that's a profound border. The next part of the border is going to be the Cascade Sierra chain. But just for the purposes of defining what we have seen, and we'll look next. This is the Propertius skipper. We saw this today. It's not a profoundly beautiful butterfly unless you're Mr. Pelham. And Mr. Pelham happens to like, kind of modelly, dusky, dark. I mean, it's a dusky wing, right? And that's cool enough for me. I think it's a really interesting butterfly, and I really like them. But let's take a look at the distribution. That is what you call a classic Pacific Coast distribution. In fact, it's so classic, it covers the whole spectrum, all the way up into British Columbia. And this is, okay, so we can say this is, Pacific Coast distribution. We can't find any reason to argue with it. Let's go to the next slide and see, okay, this is where Paula, called me up short. Can you see this map in the dark area? That's British Columbia. Yeah. Okay, that's from the British butterflies of British Columbia. And so I borrowed that slide with permission from John Shepard. And can you see the red dots?
Yes.
Those are actual distribution dots. Let's go to the next slide. This is what the glaciers look like. Go back to the first slide. One more. Now, you can see that the northern end of the current distribution was under ice. And this is something that I wanted to mention in concert with, the glaciation, but I had to find a good reason to do so, and this is it. The glaciers melted, the Proteus dusky wing dispersed up to Vancouver Island, southwestern British Columbia, and the climate, as all of this was happening, got warmer and drier and warmer and drier until now. Then they got cooler and wetter, and this is a climatic degradation. Okay, so there are this thing called climatic oscillation, and it's really pretty clear that climate can decrease, increase, decrease, increase in terms of temperature and or moisture, whatever you want to look at. But these are oscillations. All right. Now, dude, I know I didn't want to use this. I'm going to do a hand gesture. Okay, and it's not obscene. Although in some places it might be. There's a planet, I think, on the fringe of our galaxy that would consider what I'm about to do to be the death penalty, all right? It's called the climatic accordion. So, the climate fluctuates to a maximum and to a minimum, all right? Maximum, minimum. So, maximum, minimum. Maximum, minimum. Beep, accordion. Okay, that's enough. Next slide. Now, this is a butterfly that you guys we talked a little bit about today. It's called the sachem, and it's basically a Pacific coastal. Next slide. Pacific coastal distribution with a little bit of a caveat in that it actually is into the southwest, right, from Southern California. And as you see, it's penetrated to the interior in Washington and Oregon. And that has happened in my lifetime. I mean, I'm telling you that when I started studying butterflies in 1962, this was not a member of our fauna. In fact, it was like, I think 69 or 70 before it became a member of our fauna. And that means that it was doing post-glacial dispersal. And it also means it didn't much like the Puget Trough. Okay, so we still don't have them in Seattle. Now, I don't know why that is, but it's clear that they didn't get to Seattle. They went east. And in that time, as they got through the Columbia Gorge, and they got all the way to Waukegan County in the southeast, and all the way up into Spokane and Lincoln County, I would be surprised if they're in Ponderay. Someday we'll get them, that far. They're not yet in Kittitas County, and they're really not over all of Yakima. You think it should be in the Yakima Valley all the way up to Yakima. Maybe that's just a matter of time, but this is a Pacific coastal butterfly with that caveat. And we have to understand that these caveats are part of the information process that tells us, okay, so we do have a Pacific coast distribution that has, merit in terms of, the emphasis we're placing on these butterflies, okay? Now, I need to caution you at this time, we aren't going to talk about, the small white, the cabbage white. We're not going to talk about, the painted lady, the Vanessa Cartwright. We're not going to talk about Cal Torch. We're talking about butterflies that expand their ranges and just obscure any geographic information. We're going to talk about those that reveal geographic information, and this is where we're at so far. Again, please. Now, this is the Sarah orange tip. My buddy Todd Stout
divided the orange tips of this group into 3 species. Sarah, next map, shows a Pacific coastal distribution, but it's not as extensive as the ones that we just looked at for the Proteus dusky wing. And this is the map of the next one is the gray marble next. And like if you guys want to look at these butterfly pictures, or you need to look at them again, or go ahead. Oh, I forgot to mention, you need to ask questions, by the way, and you shouldn't be shy, because obviously I'm not. So you need to raise your hands and ask questions if you have one, right? Because you're doing me a disservice if you do not. If you think, well, I'm going to be polite, I'm not going to, I don't want to disturb the presentation. No. In fact, right now, you started asking questions, and we didn't get any farther than these slides on account of all the questions you asked. That's perfect. Cheryl, are you hearing me?
I'm okay.
How do you know where I was pointing? All right, next slide. Again, a Pacific distribution that's not as extensive, right? Not as extensive as the Proteus dusky wing, but it is Pacific coastal, clearly. Next. Now, this is something that is also an example, but it's not, instead of being from the Cascades to the coast kind of thing, it's kind of in the Cascades and the Sierra chain. And this is Hoffman's checker spot. Next. And this is its distribution. And you can see it kind of, spreads over. Dude, oh no, go back. Pelham screwed up. That's cedar hair streak. Oh, that felt good. All right, put some sense back. All right. So this is a cedar hair streak. I'm blind, so I can't even see the laptop. But the cedar hair streak is in fact a hair streak, because we saw it had hair streaks. And this distribution is in fact slightly deceptive in the sense that those areas that you see in Oregon and Washington that extend to the east, those are members of a juniper feeding taxon, but we don't really know what that is. So we're basically including it here because that's kind of like the way people are treating it. There are things we don't know, but other than that, if you took those eastern populations out, it's a typical West Coast, Pacific Coast distribution. Okay, next up. All right. And this is the aforementioned Johnson's hair streak. It's beautiful on the bottom, and it's as beautiful as the thicket hair streak on the bottom, but much rarer, and it occurs in a much more limited habitat. Next. And you can see that is, in fact, very restricted, but it's Pacific coastal, right? So we're getting a trend here. You're getting a comfort zone with what Pacific coastal actually means. And, we only want to do that because we're going to move down the line and look at things that will contrast with these distributions and or enhance them and or be caveats or exceptions or, prove a point or another or disprove. All right, next up. And this is, okay, so we talked about the cedar hair streak. It had a hair streak, right? So calling it a hair streak makes sense, right? But this is an elephant. You know why it's an elephant? Because it doesn't have hair streaks. And if people want to argue with me, talk to Jerry.
I agree with you, John.
Oh, well, I guess I paid you enough, all right? So, and this is basically the distribution. Again, once again, it's Pacific coastal, right? So I'm doing this to make sure that we really have a good idea of this particular distribution because the others are a little more fuzzy, all right? And, to get a feel for that fuzziness, you have to have, something that's a little concrete. Next up. Okay, so this is the Hoffman's checker spot. And again, go ahead. It's in the mountains. But again, given that fact that it's limited to the mountains, it is definitely Pacific coastal. If you look at the Sierra Cascade chain as being part of the Pacific coast distribution, this is definitely Sierra Cascade distribution, right?
Sorry.
But what happened?
Now we're back to it.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Now, this is where things get dicey. And the reason why is because, well, I live in Seattle. And it was mentioned earlier, we don't have a lot of butterflies in Seattle. In fact, Martha Robinson, who used to be a lot of a member, had her kids come in and they sang a song. And they did it to the song of the, what is it, in the jungle, the mighty jungle, Wimbaway song, right?
Oh, yeah.
Wimbaway, Wimbaway, Wimbaway. We don't have never see no butterflies. You know, that's almost true. You got woodland skipper, right? Solid every year, all the time, everywhere, right? And then, okay, moving up line, you get western tiger swallowtail. Yeah, pretty much everywhere, you know, reliable all the time. Seattle butterfly. Then you go to cabbage white, which almost doesn't count. And by the way, I call them small whites all the time because that's what the British call them. That's because they have a large white, right? Cabbage white, I don't know, man. It sounds like some kind of poor vegetarian dish. But we get them anyway. But now this one. Now this is the one. There are, echoes. I didn't mention that. The echo azure, which is largely a Pacific coastal distribution. And I know I'm going to get spanked by Caitlin for not mentioning that, but that's the way it goes. This is a butterfly. Go ahead and look at the map. That's largely Pacific coastal. But you see at the top end of this thing, it gets all the way to Montana. And it gets there not only by way of going across the northern part of Washington, the southern part of British Columbia, but the Ochocos and the Blue Mountains and Wallowa Mountains in Oregon. So what's up with that? I can't tell you for sure, but I can say that, this is a butterfly that takes advantage of situations. It lives in Seattle, so it's quite capable of doing that. And when the glaciers melted, it just followed the glaciers and found themselves, up against the Alberta Rockies, right? And that's basically what I'm saying is this is a Pacific coastal distribution with a little caveat, a little bit. Okay, so and it's gonna get worse, right? Next up. Now, going back to that map, this shows you that it had to have followed the glacial, melting to some degree at least. And that's important to understand that you can't live under a glacier. So if you are in a place where glaciers were once, then you've got there. In this case, we know where it came from. It came from the Pacific coast. And that's going to be a point of emphasis periodically through the rest of this insane thing that I'm doing right now. Okay, next up. This is a lead into the next group. This is a northern cloudy wing, which we might see tomorrow. We should have seen it today. I really was surprised we did. But a butterfly that is like the Propertius dusky wing is not what you call it outstanding, but it's not really colorful. It's kind of plainly colored. But if you look at it closely, especially if you have one in front of you, they're subtly beautiful things, little markings, little darkness here, and a little brown there. I'm obviously preaching to the choir. You all are in love with this butterfly, I can tell. I don't have to always say. Okay, next. Now this is a distribution that consists of the two subspecies we have in the western United States. And you can see that the one in purple is definitely a Pacific coastal subspecies, right? And while the one in green is largely a Rocky Mountain, it does penetrate into montane areas adjacent. And in fact, it gets into an area in Washington that was under ice. So it got there after the glaciers melted. Now, the areas further south in like Nevada and adjacent parts of Utah are areas that are montane that, would at one point or another, they're like islands floating in the sea of xeric steppe. So when we get to the intermontane habitats, we'll talk a little bit more about why it's significant that they even exist, right? But in the meantime, I just wanted to use this as a portrayal of what the intermontane area is at the same time that I could talk about a Rocky Mountain distribution. But the next slide, go ahead. This is the, get rid of that.
You know what the Thales Paleated?
Nah. Okay, so now we're going into the actual real Rocky Mountains, okay? Now, next. This is what the Rocky Mountains are supposed to look like. People will argue that it's not fair to call the Brooks Range Rocky Mountains. I think it's a fair argument. Whether or not the Rocky Mountains that exist on the border of Yukon and Northwest Territories are Rocky Mountains, it becomes less and less possible to understand. Biogeographically, they do maintain the same kind of structure all the way. So we'll just go ahead and say the Rocky Mountains, go up the spine between, BC and Alberta until they depart at the Peace River. So that is like
basically the Rocky Mountains aren't really under consideration for the Yukon. Right, next up. Another thing you need to see, and this graphic depicts it. If you think of the Cascade Sierra chain as kind of a north-south thing, it's it bends in the middle a little bit, but the Cascades and the Sierras are kind of a north-south alignment. You look at the Rocky Mountains, no, they trend to the northwest. Okay, and this trending to the northwest invites a collision between the Pacific coastal distribution and the Rocky Mountain distribution. And if you look closely, can you see where they collide? Well, we're talking of Washington and southern BC. So this collision is important in terms of what it means for the post-glacial occupation. After the glaciers move, things are moving in behind the glaciers, and they're coming both from the Pacific coastal distribution and the Rocky Mountain distribution. And they're inviting a collision, all right? Now, this collision might be no more than mixing of two different species, like or subspecies, like we did in the cloudy wing. Now, that means that they were differentiated, but they didn't turn into different species. And I think most of the time that's actually what we're seeing. I don't think a lot of species occurred, in the division between Pacific coastal and Rocky Mountain divisions. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm just trying to depict these regions and the species that occur in these distributions. No questions? Does that mean you all perfectly understand? Are you keeping up?
Right.
I need something better than that. Yeah, Mr. Pelham.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
You heard me. Okay, next up. All right. So this is an example of an obvious Rocky Mountain butterfly, and it's also an example of an exquisite butterfly that these pictures do no justice to whatsoever. I know John knows these butterflies really well. They occur in this wonderful place, the BLM land on Upper Crab Creek. The thing about this is you see around the edge of the hind wing and a little bit of the forewing what looks like to be a white fringe. It's actually a white line inside of the fringe. It's not white. That's silver. And it's just amazing. I mean, I remember you were there, 1977 at Tiger Meadows? Maybe? Or maybe you don't.
I think that was a couple of years before my time.
I was after. Oh, no, it was before your time. Dude, you're younger than I thought. Anyway, so when I saw the first one, I was actually sitting down in tall grass and, kind of taking care of some stuff. I had to go get some water or whatever. And I see these little things, and they call them skipperlings for a reason. Skippers go, skipperlings go, kind of weak and everything. And I'm looking over this thing. I knew what it was. But when I saw it, I said, oh, they didn't tell me about this. Because that silver line is spectacular. I mean, it really, truly is. And the next slide, please. That is truly a Rocky Mountain distribution. And nobody's going to argue with that. Even Powell, if he were here, because he was going to argue about the next couple of slides. But he's not here, so you don't get to. I'll try to represent his views as best. No, I won't. So next up. Okay, so the next series of entries are going to be skippers that occur basically across the country. Okay, so let's see what we got first. This is the peck skipper.
Looks like peck.
Yeah, peck. Yeah, the peck. So peck skipper. Go ahead. And that's the current distribution in our region. The next one is the distribution across the United States. Well, I was going to say, well, that's obviously an eastern butterfly that gets into Hawaii. No. It got to the Rocky Mountains, went all the way down to Colorado, New Mexico, and we got them from the Rocky Mountains. Now, it's true they occur across the United States, but the Rocky Mountains are our donor. They are the ones that represent the source of our populations, right? Next up, this is Themistocles. Anybody know the common name of Pleiades themistocles? Colloquially, excuse me.
Something edge, the tawny edge.
Would you stop?
I'm sorry.
I'm blocking that. All right, next up. And that's the distribution in western United States. It's, again, Rocky Mountain penetrating into Washington. It's quite clear. Next slide. Oh, no, it goes all the way across. Same thing. Same. It is all the way across transcontinental in the the United States and Canada, except for the very Pacific coast. But our populations came from the Rocky Mountains, and it's obvious from the distribution in the Rocky Mountains currently. Next up. And, okay, Pleiades mystic, you just keep out of this. Pleiades mystic, the common name. Huh?
Long dad.
Winner. I didn't even pay him. All right. And next slide. This is the contribution to Washington from the Rocky Mountains, and it's like, okay, well, this is like 3 skippers in a row. They basically have the same kind of conformation, which is what I'm trying to show is this Rocky Mountain influence on Washington butterflies. Next slide. And the fact that they are also trans-American in southern Canada, northern the United States, but their source for Washington is the Rocky Mountains, and that's what I'm trying to go at. Are we next up? All right. This is a cool butterfly that it's everywhere, in the Rocky Mountains, but it's in specified places. We get them in Kittitas County, but they're not really common. They're not really common in Yakima County, too, except in occasional places. But you go north, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Are they common in your area?
Yeah.
I mean, so let's take a look at the map. And you can see this is actually a Rocky Mountain butterfly that you can't distinguish their distribution in Washington from their distribution in the Rocky Mountains. And if you look a little bit, you see that actually it penetrates all the way to Alaska, right? So this is maybe more than just Rocky Mountain distribution. And in some senses, it resembles the Limonitis lorcanite. The lorcanite's admiral as a caveat to, maybe an adjustment on a pattern, but, preparing us for what is going to eventually come next, okay? And speaking of which, next. Okay, so the intermontane. We sort of talked about that a little bit. Let's go. This is the Great Basin. And, I don't know what's so great about it. But, because if you've been to the Great Basin, there's places where wasteland would be appropriate. Salt flats, old lake beds, alkali lake beds that, basically you can't breathe the dust because it'll burn your lungs. But it is a geographic region essentially situated between the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific Sierra Cascade chain. With the caveat also that the Rocky Mountains kind of bend towards the northwest. And so the intermontane range becomes more restricted in the north and more widespread in the south. It's hard to actually define it in as clear a context as the Pacific coast. But it is kind of akin. It's kind of as sloppy as the Rocky Mountain distribution. All right, next up. And this again, I go back to the the cloudy ring, showing again the west and the east, and then the center montane. Okay, next up. And what's this again? The Ribes?
Oh, the Ribes. I misread it.
I did it. You missed it.
I misread it last time.
Well, you didn't shoot well.
Yep.
Okay, I don't know why I had this in there twice. I messed up. So you can shoot me later. Next up. Okay, so this is a butterfly that we have in Washington, and it's called desert marble. And for those of you that have seen it, for those of you that haven't seen it, you're saying that looks like large marble. Well, no. And when have you gotten them up in Okinawa? Have you caught them?
Which one?
The desert marble, Lada?
Not in Okinawa.
Okay. Interesting. So it has a limited distribution north. Go ahead and take a look. And you can see that it really doesn't get too far north, but you can see that is what you call an intermontane range right there. It's at the very western edge of the Rocky Mountains, all the way to the Sierra Cascade. You see, it does penetrate a little bit into
western part, further south. But this is a classic intermontane range. It's Columbia Basin and the Great Basin combined. And some people say, well, you know, the intermontane range should include the Mojave Desert. And they say, well, Joshua trees are the only criteria. A saguaro cactus, I'm not going down there. I don't care. What the saguaro cactus and Joshua trees, I'm not giving them any press here. But next slide, okay? And this is the Yuma skipper. Jim Reed found this butterfly in Washington, for the first time, and we have since discovered them in several different places, and it was astounding. And you'll see why in a minute when we look at the next. Go ahead. This is its actual distribution. And when you look at it in Washington, it's like, what the heck? But we have to take into account the climatic oscillation. There was a time after the glaciers when everything got warmer and things spread around, and these things got to Washington, and then things went south. And things got colder and wetter, and so population disappeared. Now, it is important to recognize that they do live in freshwater marshes with Phragmites australis, their food plant, the common reedgrass, the American common reedgrass. And so they were limited in terms of where they could have been anyway. They weren't generally distributed. But the fact that they made it all the way up here, you can see that other than some places in California where they can get over into the west side, basically those California populations came from the intermontane area. So they dispersed west into California and north into the Columbia Basin. All right, so next up. And you can see that on a grander scale. Yeah, that's right. Just making sure that I know what I'm talking about. Do I? Okay, next up. Okay. Oh, silly me. Now, this is the sandhill skipper, right? Now, I don't know where the sandhill, they got that name. See, I feel so much better about in a Zoom meeting, I could have said something like that and I would have got, but I said, and it wasn't even that funny, but I got a chuckle, right? And I feel so much better. So these butterflies are really special for a number of reasons. Go ahead and take a look. They're everywhere. And so they represent not only, the intermontane distribution, but a broad intermontane distribution. And there's two things that you need to know, or at least one. Well, I'm going to tell you both anyway. They are most common in Washington, in cities. When I played football in Yakima, I was under a pig pile one time, totally pinned to the ground by 500 pounds of beef, looking out of a bird cage at a Pilates Sabuletti on a clover head looking at me like, what's up? And I did, okay. And I got out of there. This is like third day of practice in pads. And I walked home and I said, wow, I heard all of it. No, I said, look at all of the sandhill skippers on all the zinnias, all the garden. I mean, if you're in a city like Yakima or Wenatchee, the Tri-Cities, you've got people with yards. They're cultivating grass. They feed on grass. They cultivate flowers that are nectar sources. It's like, oh, let's see, wait a minute, you got grass and you water it. Okay, I'm good with that. Oh, and you got nectar sources. Hey, we're moving in. And they're Wenatchee, Don Rawls, who lived in Wenatchee, he says, I can't believe how common that butterfly is. It's more common than the Silvanardi. The woodland skipper, right? There you go. Now, I only faked that I didn't know the woodland skipper, just so you don't feel better about yourselves. Didn't work, did it? No. All right. But the other thing about these things is that one of the ways that they get dispersed about is, you guys ever seen a truck going down the road with turf, rolls of turf on a flatbed? Well, that's lawn turf, right? Well, what they're doing is they're exporting Sabuletti, sandhill skippers all over the western United States. And if you think I'm fooling, Andy Warren, he says, I went down and examined, they had me come down and examine turf rolls that had the pupae of Sabuletti all over them, right? So now that's a clever butterfly. Live in cities and then export yourself all over the world, right? Like, I'm surprised they're not in Odessa, Russia now. No, I am surprised. I mean, come on. So, next slide. All right. And this is one that Dave and I just talked about. The abundance of this butterfly in recent years in burned out habitats in both Glickitat and Yakima counties. It is another example of an intermontane butterfly that made it, into Washington, and it is an amazing butterfly. Actually, it's a large butterfly. So it's as large as a dusky next up, and that's its distribution. And this is intermontane. But you notice that when I do this intermontane, hardly any of those things get into Canada. So as the glaciers, melted, these butterflies said, oh no, we're not going to BC. That's what it is, right? Next up. Okay, so now we get to the crux. Okay, now I don't know how many hours I got left. Do I have anybody timing me out?
Well, the only problem now is we're losing the light. So I wonder if I can turn some lights on.
Change up. All right, are we all right?
Yeah.
I was doing fine until everybody wanted the lights to change it. All right, so the big deal about what I saved this for last because it is so complicated in some ways and so illustrative in others. All right, so we're talking about the boreal forest, and Paulette, first thing she had a chance to look at this PowerPoint, she said, "Well, so what's the taiga?" And I said, good question. So officially, the taiga is a Russian word for the subarctic forests that occur in the Lena and Yana basins in Russia. Low level, moist forests and like vast Arctic bogs, okay? But it has come to represent the subarctic zone everywhere in the northern hemisphere. So you're not wrong to say taiga. I like taiga because it sounds a lot like tiger, and a lot of ways to go with that. But I'm going to say boreal forest because that's all the texts that I learned from. They call it boreal forest. Now this is next. This is a stand. At least in this case, we have to give ourselves a lot of latitude because this is subarctic, but in that green area, there's a lot of places where mountains actually are Arctic alpine. And so if an accurate rendition of boreal forest was given, it would be a composite sort of checkerboard. It would be a mosaic, all right? But it's good enough, to get the points across that I hope to. And so next. Now, we're going to go back and forth on these, right? Where's the boreal forest with, in relation to this map? I need an answer. Under the eyes. You guys are really good. I never doubted it. I had some reservations, but let's go back. Now, if you look again at the total glacial, go ahead back. No, the other way. All right. So you can see that there are some caveats. There's open areas, unglaciated areas in various places. So it's not absolute, and nothing can be. I mean, in nature, especially if you're looking backwards. So we'll go ahead to the next one. This is a classic boreal species. It's called the Canadian tiger swallowtail. All right, and we barely get it into Washington, and it's like, depending who you talk to, it might be introgressed individuals, right? So I personally examined forest specimens from Ferry County that drain to Canada, and I honestly think they were Canadian tiger swallowtails. But at any rate, it's like nearly peripheral, if not actually peripheral, next. And this is its range. That is almost like class textbook boreal distribution.
distribution, right? But I have a question, all right? So where was this butterfly when all the ice was there? Come on, where was it? Where are these butterflies?
Somewhere else.
Somewhere. Well, she's not wrong. They were somewhere south, right? And that's important because if you look at this map, somewhere south brought them right into Washington. So it's not impossible for us to conceive of the time when Canadian tiger swallowtails were our tiger swallowtail, our only tiger swallowtail, because, you know, the others were farther south still. So this,
Weren't there glacial refugia in like Alaska and Yukon?
Well, yeah, but that's a long ways to go to get to. I mean, if you look at this distribution now, you can either say that the glaciers melted and the refugia in Alaska repopulated all of these, or that those refugia actually represent a distinct event, and Canadian tiger swallowtails were all the way to New England and south, and the evidence suggests that they were all the way into New England and south. So there are two things. Definitely were glacial refugia, in Yukon and Alaska, and it's conceivable that they represented places where Canadian tiger swallowtails would have dispersed from, but not this total range. Okay, and the genomic data seems to support that as well. So it's a good question because it's apropos the fact that there were refugia and that these things can explain many things, but they can't explain everything. And again, we're looking back in time, right? This is a current distribution. What actually transpired is like, maybe, but we'll go with the fact that, these things were south. They were, I don't know if they went all the way to California. I don't know if they went all the way. Well, I have evidence that they went all the way to Colorado because, Andy Warren actually collected a specimen from high in the Rockies that was almost a complete carbon copy of a Canadian tiger swallowtail, right? Well, it's not a Canadian tiger swallowtail. It is a swallowtail, a western tiger swallowtail that had introgression at one time, and it shows up as a rare manifestation. We don't know that either, but at least it gives us the idea. Now in Montana, that's a different story. Steve Kohler gets a lot of Canadian tiger swallowtails and introgressed individuals in Montana. So the idea that they were south of the ice is pretty well established, and for the purposes of this conversation, it's not a deal breaker, right? So next up, what is that, man? Oh, Fred. Okay, now we have two people in this room that have actually seen Fred, I think, right? Three people, because, isn't that right? Jim, Cheryl, and me, right? And this is not a common butterfly in Washington. It actually only occurs in the Okanagan Range. But next, you can see that, it actually has very much a boreal distribution. And so we can say that, all right, the things that are in Washington got left there as the glaciers melted, right? This is speculation, we don't know that, but it seems reasonable. It kind of looks like, now you look at the Rocky Mountains, obviously they got all the way down the Rocky Mountains and they're not on either side of them. They got left behind as they retreated, as they invaded north. Retreated isn't the right word, invaded is the right word. Okay, next up, and this is one that actually is pertinent to us, and this is one of my favorites I'm going to tell you about. I made this up, and I'm so proud of myself that I've got to repeat it. This is silver-bordered furlary, right? Okay, so take a look at this image. Next image. What am I looking at? Oh man, I totally botched this. Okay, I botched this. This distribution includes Columbia Basin, right? Moxie Bog, Whitman, Beaver Butte, BLM land. But it's not a Columbia Basin butterfly. They got left behind in the Columbia Basin. I don't know how I did. Well, I know how I did that. I was thinking too much of you all and how I was going to brutalize you for an hour and 75 minutes. So these butterflies, and I'm still going to talk to you about the silver-bordered furlary because it's also
John.
for a long time, right? And so
the populations at Beaver Butte, by the way, they had a fire there, and people were really concerned about that. And so they had an expedition to go up there, and it was like they were more common than they had been before, right? And I'm into that. So there's places where, and I think it's the BLM land, it's pretty healthy. John Bauman,
Yeah,
are they still common up there in Lincoln County?
at where?
Well, the BLM land, Upper Crab Creek.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We saw 50
Yeah,
there
well,
2 weeks ago.
40 plus
Well, there you go, right?
last week.
So we can have places where, but see, WWW is looking at those as like, they're not maximum management, concerns. And so,
Get more light at that.
you coming back?
Yeah. Was it back to
Okay,
recording?
we are ready to go until the next thing goes
Yeah, what are you
wrong.
doing, man? Okay. So let's see, where we were. Colophus polios,
I thought it was.
the hoary elephants. And this is my example of a beautiful butterfly that's tiny and just exquisite, right? People like things that are, like a green elephant, that's okay. I think green elephants are pretty cool too, and look at the frosting on the hind wing of these things. It's like almost unreal. Wait a minute, how'd they do that, right? Well, it's a combination of white and black scales, really. So let's take the next slide. That's the distribution. That's pretty close to a boreal distribution. Well, you see it extends further south. Well, this is the other thing that we want to keep emphasizing, is a product of circumstance and fortune. Obviously, they extend well into the Rocky Mountains, and they're a big part of northeastern Washington. And there's things in the coast. So there was some shenanigans going on here. We can't really sort out clearly. We have an idea about what's going on, but we can't state clearly. But we can say this is a butterfly whose the northern end of this distribution is clearly a typical boreal distribution, but the southern part represents the drying puddle. As they moved north, they left puddles of themselves behind, and we're going to find that as I'm repeating. That's going to explain a lot of distributions of Washington butterflies. Next. Okie dokie. This is the Judah Arctic, and this is a butterfly that does not occur here, but it has a distribution next that replicates. No, that's not Judah Arctic. Oh man. Okay, shoot me. And I won't have to live through the misery. I goofed this up. Right. Okay. You pressed it. All right, go ahead. I'm done with it. Judah Arctic. Judah Arctic is an interesting word that represents a Norse god. And I only introduced that because I just watched a Netflix series called The Vikings. And if you buy that, you'll buy anything. Okay, so this is what is interesting coming next. Go ahead and relook at the. Did you start that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you go back again. Oh, puzzlers. All right. So there are things that are poorly understood. We've talked about some of those, at least a little bit. And there's things that really don't make any sense at all. But this is something. Okay, next up. This is a butterfly we saw today. Rocky Mountain Parnassian. Go ahead. Wow, that is a Rocky Mountain distribution with caveats, right? You can see that it's kind of dispersed in the areas in the south part. Those dispersals are kind of like misleading in the sense that their occurrence in those squares these are all iNaturalist records. The occurrence in those squares is oftentimes like one or two localities in the isolated mountain. If we had a dot distribution map, you'd see that no, the primary distribution is quite clearly, the Rocky Mountain and Cascadian. It doesn't even occur in Oregon until you get to Southwest Oregon or in the Wallowas, the Blues. You don't get into the Oregon Cascades in Sherman County or Deschutes County and find Rocky Mountain Parnassians, right? They pretty much end right where we got them today, right? Going south, right? And so this is maybe not that extreme, but again, you see that it doesn't really get far north either. It's basically a Rocky Mountain distribution, with legs. All right, next. Can't even read that. What's it say? Same thing? Smoothies? Yeah. Okay, that's the distribution in Washington. And that shows you where the population in Oregon is in the Southwest, and the populations of Washington are in the Olympic Mountains, and then distributed, in the central portion. So keep going, right? And this is a butterfly that I wish I knew more about in terms of overall distribution. It's the Crixus arctic. I had a fellow today bring a great arctic and said, "Is this a Crixus?" I said, "How did it come here?" Right? And they're like in Cheryl's part of the world, they're pretty common, right? If you go east, they're less and less common. They're kind of sketchy here and there, but basically in northern Okanagan, they're pretty common. But they don't get far south in the Cascades next. And we can see that distribution is like kind of weird. You got this thing back east, and one has a tendency to think that it kind of got left back there, and the habitat that was in the boreal forest in the middle wasn't suitable, right? Because it gets all the way to Alaska, right? So we could say, well, it's like the Smithius Parnassian or the Rocky Mountain Parnassian in some ways, but it's not exactly. It's like a little different. So we don't really know or understand this distribution pattern. It's not obviously boreal forest. It's not obviously Rocky Mountain. It has elements of both, but it's montane. So I don't know. I just threw it out there so that they're a puzzler. It's worth noting that the puzzlement is part of the game, and if I'm puzzled, I'm pretty much enticed, and I want to go find out. I want to get something to look at. All right, next. Okay, now they call this the Labrador sulfur because it was originally described for Labrador. But now, Cheryl, have you gotten those?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cheryl and I have gotten those, and I don't think anybody else has. Melanie, have you gotten those?
No.
So,
Well, I've seen them, but I have seen them. I haven't got
Okay.
a picture of them.
now, when we went to the Arctic in '89, I had a chance to see these a lot. And so I decided this Labrador sulfur stuff is a bunch of nonsense. So I named them the nasty sulfur. Now, there's a good reason for it, and that is they never go downhill. I can't imagine how that happens, but I never saw a single one going downhill. They always go uphill at a nice clip, let's say, nice clip, right? Now, this boy in '89 could actually run things down, and so I had to. But now, the other thing that's a problem is they fly about 4 inches off the ground. Yeah. And so, they're going uphill 4 inches off the ground. That's nasty. I'm sorry, I know that was abusive language, but.
It's fascinating. In northern Alaska?
Oh, yeah. These things are Arctic butterflies. What are they doing in Washington? Well, that map is just totally awry. Dude, I am sorry I let you down. I don't know what happened. Next slide. Anyway, they only get into Washington in Okanagan County in about maybe 7 places in the whole state. So, all right, yeah, you can see it what they are in Washington. I don't understand that. I don't know why they have this distribution. An Arctic butterfly that penetrates to Washington would be okay if it was also part of a boreal distribution across, but it's not. It's an Arctic butterfly that goes straight from the Arctic down British Columbia and into Okanagan County. Okanagan Range, really, that's the only place they're found. Is that right? Horseshoe Mountain and
Bunker Hill.
Chipaka, right?
Bunker Hill.
Who?
Bunker Hill.
Yeah, Bunker Hill.
Bunker Hill, which is part of the Horseshoe Mountain complex,
Yeah.
right? Okay. And what are we looking at here?
Where do Cardocephalus got it?
Cardocephalus. Now, Cardocephalus is a Greek word, or maybe it's Latin, for Carter's head. Now, do you want to know who Carter was?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. So this is the Arctic skipper that we didn't see here today. It also is one of those butterflies that's truly a marvel to look at. It sort of looks like a skipper. It sort of has spots in the places, that a branded skipper would have them. But it's actually a very unusual butterfly. And most of the species in that genus are in the Old World. So, we have 2 in the New World, which is like good for us, right? Next. And this is its distribution. That's kind of weird too. Now, even though it does have an eastern counterpart, they consider that, some people consider that a distinct species from the western counterpart. In which case, we have another example of a butterfly that's largely Arctic, penetrating deep into the United States. And we can only suspect that it was a butterfly that had, boreal forest attributions, and it was able to penetrate in all directions. So, I caught them in the Arctic. We get them in Tenino Prairie. That's what I got this for, right?
John, that map does not indicate the populations of the Arctic skipper in Spokane County.
Yeah.
They're actually pretty common there.
Oh, yeah.
This is just iNaturalist, I think.
Yeah, this is iNaturalist, right? So,
Well, I've been plugging data in there.
okay,
Yeah,
well,
there you go.
hey, it could be another failure on my part. Thanks for pointing it out.
Did we get that on tape?
Hey, I'm good with that,
In faster.
Science is about making mistakes. Idiocy is about making a lot of them. Next. Okay, so this is Arabia fiddleri, fiddler's alpine. This is a very special butterfly. And this is a puzzler in like 2 dimensions. One is, next, this is the total range of that butterfly in the whole world. This is it. It's a Washington and British Columbia butterfly, period. Well, that's the one thing that's cool, that we have a butterfly like that, and we're all privileged. And really, they're not uncommon. If you go to Whistler Basin on Highway 2, anywhere in the Olympic Peninsula at the right time of year, Slate Peak in the meadows at or above, below the peak itself, at or below Harts Pass, that's a butterfly you're going to see, and it's really an attractive butterfly actually. But this is the only place it occurs. So this is, it's kind of a unique example, actually. But worse than that, it belongs to a group of Arabia. People have been doing work on Arabia. They've been discussing the patterns of distribution, in structural evolution of structural arrangement of Arabia across the globe since 1920s. And everyone came to the conclusion that this butterfly isn't related to any other Arabia group. Now, they're all in the same genus, right? So Arabia fiddleri and Arabia, epipsodia, Vidler's alpine and Butler's alpine, side by side, you're going to say, right. They're not ringlets and they're not Arctics. They're not wood nymphs. We know what they are, right? But in terms of the scientific aspect, they're really unique. And this is a thing that it's a puzzler from the point of view is like, how did they get here? And what are the nearest relatives to them are in the Alps, Alps. Alps. All right, next up. Now, this one is really interesting to me because Cheryl knows a lot about these. She discovered, Cheryl, both you guys discovered the ones up in
Smoke mean.
Yeah, right.
Very common.
Well, okay, see.
Gold Creek.
Well, okay, did you get one up Toad's Coulee?
No, not Toad's Coulee. Smoke mean. That where it comes down.
Okay, but it's not Similkameen at Shanker's Bend, it's further west, right? The one you gave Bob Pilot, the locality gave.
Yeah, right below
yeah.
Chappaqua.
Closer to Oroville versus.
Yeah.
Right, further west.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Right below.
and he went up there and couldn't find them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Well,
When he got stopped by a border patrol because he went too far past where I told him he was gone. And so he crossed into, oh my gosh, he got in trouble. But of course he can talk and he got himself out of trouble.
now,
And he got himself a
why is that comical on two different levels? One is I can see his stout body getting, the traveling gnome getting caught by the border patrol, and then the traveling gnome saying, well, what's that? Give me the, hit it. And pulling it off, I mean,
Yeah, he got invited to their house for dinner.
that's not surprising. So in Washington, we have these northern Okanagan populations, and then we have these lower Snake Creek populations, and maybe a handful of other records that are either undocumented or problematic, right? A newcomer had one from Cottonwood Creek, and I went with him to Cottonwood Creek to the same place. The food plant wasn't there, and I never found one. And then Bob revisited the locality that he's been looking for him along the Columbia River in this county, and he just told me that he had the food plant. In fact, he was coming back from the injury that contributed to his not being here tonight. Just on the way back from that, and stopped and found that all the food plants that he had scoped out 2 years ago were gone now, right? And I suspect these things, like you can see, they look a lot like melitocrescents, and they are thistle feeders. Melitocrescents, they'll eat just about any thistle, right? Native, invasive, they really don't care. These may not. These may be, this is our thing. I know in the lab they will, but in terms of like female position, they may not. And so it may be that Canadian thistle basically outcompeted the native thistles, and its range today is a relic of what was broader. But let's look at the map. Now that is goofy. All right. So it's not, so we got this Northwest distribution and this, Southern Rocky Mountain distribution. I don't know how to explain that based on the parameters that we established earlier on in this presentation. Pacific Coastal, Rocky Mountain, Intermontane, Boreal, it's none of those things, and it doesn't reflect even part of it in most cases. You can say, the Southern Rocky Mountains is a Rocky Mountain distribution. Oh, yeah, but most Rocky Mountain distributions extend at least to the border, right? And then the Northwest portion is like not necessarily, it doesn't make sense. What I'm saying is I'm confounded.
Does it reflect the distribution of its host plant?
Only insofar as we know it, all right? So no known colonies exist no extant colonies exist where that food plant isn't there. However, the Southern Rocky Mountain populations use a different food plant. So I don't know about those. But people I know in the Rocky Mountains tell me that they're just as sketchy, in Utah for that, they're just as sketchy in there. Like in Utah, he said, Todd Stout told me, well, JP, like if you're going 12, you can find colonies here, there, and there. But you have to go 150 miles before you find another one. And there's mountain ranges in the way, deserts? No. It's just, that's the way they're distributed. And when you have, that's the way they're distributed, it's like, it's Walter Cronkite, and that's the way it is, right? So, I don't know, it's an interesting conundrum, all right? Next up. Now we get into some really neat stuff, all right? Now, it's going to take a little while here, and since I got 175 minutes, I'm going to take my time. Now, this is all one species, all right? And you can say, well, wait a minute, isn't one of those an occidentalis and another one an orange sulfur? And the quick answer is no. These are Christina sulfurs, and we have Christina in our state, but its distribution makes absolutely no sense. And I will try to show it. It's not exactly starkly clear, but next up. Okay, let's start in the north. All right, so it's in south eastern Alaska and through good part of Yukon Territory. The southern part, it doesn't get into the strictly Arctic portions of either state. And then it kind of peters out on its way to the Peace River in British Columbia. We found them in the Peace River. And it's like, okay, well, fine. Where do they go from there?
Well, they go east all the way to the Rocky Mountains around them and south through Alberta into Montana. Okay, well, that's fine. That's a distribution that, it doesn't concern us because it's not, well, wait a minute. In Montana, they do a turn west and they go all the way into eastern Okanagan County. But what's worse than that, they go north from there. So that you can't really see this in this pattern because the squares are too big. But if you actually saw the patterns, you see it's a big J hook. So you're going from the north, you go south and around the Rocky Mountains, through Montana, and then back up into British Columbia. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, and gentle people, they make no sense doing that. So I don't know what to tell you. Everybody wants to, well, my good buddy, Steve Kohler in Montana says, well, JP, I think you haven't recognized the fact that there's two different species here. And I think he might be right. But, I don't know. The whole problem is that, as a cataloger, I'm kind of obligated to what has been published. If it's by, a legitimate source in a legitimate journal. Nobody's touching this because it's like, we don't know what's going on either, right? Caitlin and I went through, and Ben Mouse and I went through Montana in 2023, encountered a number of these things. And Ben came up to me and he said, Steve says these are 3 different species. I said, yeah, I know. He said, but they're all feeding on the same thing and they actually look alike except for yeah, I know. He says, so what are they? I don't know. And we already know. But now the next one, this is like classic, okay? This is all Western sulfurs. You guys seen Western sulfurs today, right? Did you know they get orange? Did you? I mean, a simple yes or no would do. All right. Well, I'm guaranteeing you they do. That's an extreme example.
In Washington?
Yes. Paul Hammond, my buddy, named a population from the Blue Mountains. Well, from the Ochocos into the Blue Mountains in Malawi. He called it, and I really like this. I really, really like this name, Resplendence. And next slide. This is an example of resplendence from one day sampled by 4 different people working very hard, and same day, same locality. Yeah. So what do you do with that? Well, that's bad enough in one place. And this is in the Ochoco Mountains. Now, you go far enough east and they all get orange. But in the Ochocos, you're halfway between, the Blue Mountains and the Cascades. And the Cascades are all yellow. Now, when we look at the map that's coming up, you can see that what we call Occidentalis Western sulfur, it's a Pacific coastal butterfly. It's like so typical Pacific coastal butterfly that I could have started with it, but then I had to explain this mess. So instead of starting with it for a Pacific coastal butterfly, I want to explain this mess now. No, I won't. I'm not even going to come close. But the point is that the yellow ones don't reflect UV, okay? And the interesting thing is that how many sulfurs are there on the West Coast? There's not that many. Almost all the sulfurs that we have, in Washington, we occasionally get, a cloud. What do they call Arifoli? Is it the clouded sulfur or Western clouded sulfur or?
Arifoli sulfur is what Bob and I landed on.
Well, they just call it Arifoli?
Yeah, that's what Bob and I call it. Because there's already a Western sulfur, so calling it a Western clouded sulfur just seems a little too confusing.
Yeah, and clouded sulfur can't be used because it's Eastern, right?
Yeah.
So Arifoli?
Yeah.
Well, thanks. I'll cite you from now on. And Bob will disclaim you, of course. But, all right. Well, Arifoli is really rare west of the Cascades, at least in Washington and in California for that matter. So there's not a lot of competition for identification by females. Now, earlier tonight I was talking to people about UV reflectance and how that, okay, let's break it down to little girls like to flirt, little boys like to show off.
So the girls are letting out some kind of pheromone or something like that, and the boys are saying, hey, all right, let me go show you my wings. So let's take a look at that map, Nick. Look where they are. So everything's cool up and down the coast where they occur, and then suddenly they break down and they go across the Ochakos. Next slide. Let me see. What happened to this?
I'll go back.
Yeah. Does this show Utah at all?
Yeah.
I'm blind, all right? So it goes across the Ochakos into the Wallowas and the Blue Mountains, crosses over into Idaho, skirts the Snake River Plains, south, doesn't go north, stays south, right around the plains, rounds the Horn and gets into Utah. Now you tell me what kind of a distribution pattern that is. And by the time you get into Utah, they're all orange. Todd gives me endless heat. He said, JP, that's not an occidentalis, it's yellow. I said, no, Todd, no, man, it's yellow, you can't. Occidentalis are orange. I said, Todd, settle down. And it is a pattern, however, of distribution that almost has no explanation. It's not like left behind by a boreal, a glacier is melting. It's not necessarily obvious that it dispersed. I mean, for all we know, it dispersed from Utah, got to the coast and went crazy. I mean, I don't know, right? So we're leaving it there, and these are just things to think about. But if you get a chance to go to Wausogon County, the only way you're going to find them, and I love to tell people these things because there's people like, oh, I don't know, Cheryl and Gino, that will climb in a rock slopes to get to the base of basalt cliffs and find the lathyrus, the pea vine that they use, and that's where they are. And that's the only place where they are. And Keith Brady took a picture one. It was the most spectacular picture that I've seen he's done, and he's done a lot. And it was of one of these resplendents leaving the flower, opening its wings, and it showing this glint of orange and a ventral hind wing, such that you could tell definitely what it was, and it was spectacularly beautiful. But so I would recommend that if you want to take it upon yourself, and you don't mind the potential for physical harm, then take a look at the screes. And the good place is Field Springs State Park. Anybody know where that is? Yeah. And Puffer Butte, that whole thing. You can see where they are from the park. And you can see why people don't go there, right? So, okay, next up. All right. I said I'm grateful for your attention, and I might be, I don't know. It has been my pleasure. See if there's another slide. Okay, let's go back. All right. Oh,
Hang on.
what?
Hey, we'll go back.
Okay, well,
Get locked into place.
that's all right.
I can go through like the whole thing.
Asparagus.
Maybe like this. I can get to it, John.
So I have another thing for y'all, right? And so how many people here here have heard me talk about biological imperatives? Come on, I know so many people have heard me say biological imperatives.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the first biological imperative?
Stay alive,
Yeah, baby. So what's the second one?
reproduce.
Exactamundo. And these are, they're so fundamental that no one can really, they're inarguable, right? And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. Well, staying alive is, it's complicated. And, like finding a mate, finding shelter, finding food resources, avoiding being eaten. These are all things that come under staying alive. And so, yeah. And then, of course, on the other hand, reproduction, it's finding a mate, showing off, and, having the two, mating take place. And then, of course, ovipositing, which is a tremendous, if you don't have a female able to oviposit properly, then the reproduction is just like, not going to happen. So, and of course, you can't reproduce if you're not alive. Unless I'm mistaken. Right. So, one day in 2003, Kiyoshi Hiruma and my son Zach were cruising the hills on a canyon outside the Ania River Valley. And it had been burnt 2 to 3 years before that. And so it was, anybody that's been on the East Slope knows what, burned habitats at or near the ecotone, the lower edge of the forest, look like after a burn. You got Ceanothus, velutinus everywhere. It's just like a chaparral, right? And this is no different. And we visited these places because we knew that burned habitats are usually biodiverse places, and within the first 7 years of the burn, and sometimes longer. So, we were doing our diligence and visiting these places. And that was actually a productive day in terms of inventory. It wasn't like we got any outstanding species. Are you pointing at my
Yes. I'm sorry. Wrapped around my legs.
Was it wrapped around your legs?
Don't pull it too tight.
I can't.
I didn't do that. It was like that already.
Right, I did it.
I want to hear about the place that was burned.
Well, I'd like to get there. All right, so we had a good inventory. No species were like wild status, but it was good. And with me, inventory is number of species. Like today, 42 species for what we did today. 46 species for what we did today is outstanding. I mean, it really is. Okay. And it's because we had people that knew where they were going and what they were going about, and we had y'all. Okay, now I don't know. There's a lot of people that probably didn't think they played a big role. I'm guaranteeing you, y'all did. Because you let me be there. First of all, I thought that was generous to a max, right? And I enjoyed the heck out of that, right? But on this day in this canyon. I was getting near the end. It was like 4:30, and I'm getting tired. It gets light, at the end of the day. And I was waiting for the boys to come off the hill before we go home, and had to drive all the way back to Seattle. And I saw what do they call it? Pale tiger or pale swallowtail?
I call it pale tiger.
Pale tiger swallowtail was coming down valley, and it was a shallow bed, okay, and it was a bed of a small creek, and not much in terms of growth. Some willow coming back and stuff like that, but it was no great shakes. It wasn't steep, and it was cruising back and forth. Can you hold this mic for a second? Okay, so I'm going to be a pale swallowtail for a minute, right? Can you imagine that? Well, before I got sunburned, I was kind of pale, so it was cruising with its wings in the dihedral. So it was going down one side, down the other. Every once in a while it would flap, all right? And so I could see this, and I was like, oh, he's not in a hurry. I'm right. Can I have that back now? Give it back. And I kept watching, and it got closer. I kept watching, and it got closer, and I kept watching, and it got to the point where it was passing me. And I was, maybe 8 feet away from it, and I noticed, wow, it's one thing that jumped out at me. It was dusted with pollen all over the lower part of the thorax. It was just orange. But the thing that really got to me, can you hold this again? It had 6 legs, and they were all hanging out like this. And I mean, okay, when I said hanging out, I mean, let it all hang out. It was cruising at a moderate speed, bumping back and forth, and had all of its legs hanging out. Now, it passed me. And I had a quandary. So what did I just see? My immediate response was, that was an insect, a butterfly, having a good time. And I thought to myself, they don't have the nervous tissue to do that. I mean, a butterfly's nervous system, they're cerebral. I'm trying to think of the word. What are they called? Cerebral ganglia and the thoracic ganglia are almost equal in size. And there's a ganglion associated with the genitalia. Having a good time doesn't seem like even a possibility with such limited nerve resources, right? And yet my eyes told me that, no, we're having a good time. And then things started to circulate.
So I was with Paul Severs. You know, we met Don Severs. That's Paul's dad, and dad and mom. And I went with Paul into west of Madras in Oregon, and we came across this place where I could see it was just full of. I walked into this road and I saw more than 10 silver spotted skippers flying like this. And of course, you know, do any of you know what silver spotted skippers are like?
Yeah.
Big.
Crazy.
And when they fly, they go. I mean, they flap their wings. You can hear. It's like, okay, you know, they're serious. And I was like, well, this is a good place. And then I walked up the road a little bit, and I saw something in the distance, and I walked up. It was more than 20 Lord Quinn's admirals perched on some poop. Now, I know the value of poop to most people. I mean, you know, it's stinky. It's definitely not edible. But if you ask a Lord Quinn's admiral, man, they were on it. And you know, they were so on it that I walked up on them and they didn't care. And they were just plugged in with each other, scuttling around, trying to get as much of that poop as they could. And I looked at them and I said, well, they're definitely excited. Mm-hmm. Is excitement possible when you have a limited nervous resource? And then I said, well, they're having a good time. Wait a minute, having a good time. And then 3 years after that, 3 years before that, I recall something that in the Settle Mountains, east of Vantage, we climbed up and got to a site on the crest. Had to go up the south side to get to the top, and I got to the highest point on this crest, and I saw these old world or bears, swallowtails flying around. And I got to look at them up close. And I wasn't going to, I didn't need any more bear swallowtails. I was just watching them, right? And I said, oh, well, they had their legs hanging down too. And so it became apparent to me that our interpretation of having a good time does not apply to butterflies. And then it occurred to me that, wait a minute, how many of you have seen people butterflies nectaring? And are they having a good time? Does it seem like they're having a good time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to amend the biological imperatives. The biological imperatives now consist of staying alive, reproducing, and having a good time. Now, I find you all really disgusting, and I'm duty bound to tell you that I did this under pressure, right? I thank you for every little bit that you gave me today. I enjoyed it. I complained a little, and I'm weak and tired. But like I told everybody, from here down, I'm 75. From here up, I'm 9. Thank you very much. All right. Questions? Come on.
So the meadow fritillaries, that's pretty common back east. I assume that would look like a boreal distribution.
Yeah. One of the questions that I had, do I want to include every possibility? The boreal, western, the meadow fritillary is definitely a boreal butterfly. Definitely has a distribution. However, we would probably call it a Rocky Mountain distribution in Washington, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not as much due north as it is from the Rocky Mountains. I kind of ducked those issues because then I would have to do explaining, and people would think I was prevaricating. You like that word?
Yep.
Prevaricating. That's before you varicate, right? Now, I don't know what varicate means, but prevaricating seems to mean something. Well, come on. I gave enough little...
John,
Yeah?
what do you make of silver-bordered fritillaries being formerly a circumboreal distribution all over the northern hemisphere, or like mourning cloaks, which are?
I think it is subject to review, but
people that I know, other than the people that did the revision, already know what they know, what they think. People I know that are in Europe and Russia, and people in North America, like John Shepard, he did, yeah, I think so. They're obviously most closely related to the European Beloria seleni, which was, I don't know what they called there, but at any rate, I would say that I'm fairly confident, in a much higher degree of confidence than I am for some of the things that genomic work has delivered, that they are a species distinct from the other that was considered conservative. I ain't putting that in concrete, but I'm okay with that, It seems to have more support from more sources than just the one that, made all the news. Is that good enough?
I have a question.
You have a question?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. That's a peanut gallery, right?
Yeah.
All right, go.
As you see on the maps, obviously there was the speckled distribution in northern Canada. How thoroughly have people collected in northern parts of Canada?
Well, actually, more thoroughly than you would suspect, although it's very intermittent. There are places that have access more easily than other places, like the Boothia Peninsula. The whole problem with it is the Arctic ice. Now that we no longer have Arctic ice in the summer, people can actually motivate into these places, and there are people doing more sampling. But it's a good question. Brooks Range in Canada really heavily sampled, right? But there are places in Nunavut, that aren't really well sampled. So yeah, the sampling is always going to be an issue, and even iNaturalist doesn't get a lot of sampling in northern Arctic Canada. Nice question.
Thank you.
Mr. Peanut.
Thank you.
Come on, man. Silence doesn't become you, but it's rapidly becoming you.
All right, well, what about, in terms of having a good time, what about I'm thinking when it's impeding another biological imperative. So I saw this blue today, diving into the yellow flower, it was gonna fall in, and it was forgetting, to look around for a minute. So if it's, maybe if it's not driven to be enjoying what it's doing, forgetting about staying alive or the reproducing part for a moment, then that could be part of some strengthening of evidence.
So what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is what if having a good time gets you killed?
Right.
Yeah, well, I think we can ask ourselves that question. Every once in a while, there's a bargain that's made, and sometimes it's the devil's bargain. But that is a good question.
Well, if it's a strong enough drive, to make that bargain, then maybe it is, built in.
I think they're competing sometimes, okay?
Yeah.
So if in fact your initial motivation is to feed yourself, that if in the process of feeding yourself you have a good time, then sometimes it's too late. You already begun feeding yourself and you are busy having a good time, and then the ambush will eat your head. No matter, hey, how many things in life that actually work most of the time, except when they don't, right? Yeah. I thought I saw a hand raise. Was that
One more thing. And they got all those different forms. You mentioned, are you just doing it by the underside, the ventral side, or are you doing it by some other means?
Well, fortunately for us, the Western sulfur with all that variation doesn't occur anyplace else where the others could be confused with it. Like Christine is way north, right? The only thing that is going to be compared to are orange sulfurs and Erifili. Did I get that right, Caitlin? Oh, she already left. You can't talk to me that way.
What?
What? Erivally.
What about it? I was talking to somebody. Process.
Well, uggity buggity. No, basically, you know, that it's sulfurs are like next to checker spots, really hard. And one of the things that happens is like that series that we had a whole case full of, that gave you an idea of the complexity and the difficulty of trying to sort these things out. So in the case of being in the Blue Mountains, you don't have competition with other lookalike sulfurs, so it's pretty easy. That's a good question. I mean, for a peanut.
I got no more peanut questions.
We got anything else?
Well, I think everybody will start throwing tomatoes in if I ask one question.
Are we done or what?
That was the coolest talk I've ever heard of.
Oh, you
in my life.
look! I'm not going to listen to you. You're my buddy,
It
right?
really was.
Now, if you were a critic, then I'd say, "Oh, wow, really?" You got any critics out there?
That was the coolest talk I ever heard.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you guys are pretty cool and everything, but I'm not buying all that stuff, right? I'm not buying all your stuff, right? Until I get to my lava hat.
Well, thank you for not going to report.
Thank you for making it more difficult. Can you see that? All right. Do you know what that is? That's called earth shot.
No.